We're here to talk about Denville, New Jersey. I'm pretty sure it's the only one there is. There's tons of Fairviews and Clintons and Greenvilles all across the country. But there's only one Denville. So I'm told anyway. What makes up a town? How do you define community? You can look at a map of a town and see where one street starts and another one ends, where the highway is. It's pretty much the same everywhere you go, from state to state. Where on a map does it tell you about the people, about how they lived and loved, about how they worked and worshiped, about how they made their homes a community? Our hometown is what it is because others have gone before us, have given us a history and trusted us with a heritage which guides our growth. The new builds on the old, but doesn't forget it. The earth has been around for thousands of years, so a mere century seems like a drop in the bucket. But in that time, a lot has changed. We've gone from this quiet country village to the hub of Morris County, and we're about to show you how we got there. Who knows what the next 100 years has in store? Welcome.
In the 1930s, in a newspaper article in the early 1930s, it was reported about this story about a John Den living near where the Den Brook and the Rockaway River met around the time of the Revolution. That's never been documented. Maybe there was a John Den, but records from that time period do not show anybody by the name of Den in this area. We know John Hinchman built his house in Denville in 1800. So we know he was here early. He recounts the story of an area along the Rockaway River that Hinchman had called a den of wild animals. And if you travel there to the approximate location, they say it was near a knoll in the marshy area of along the river, was a place where the Lenape would hunt, and many arrowheads were found on this knoll.
The story that the Indian authorities tell us is that the Indians used to make a trip every year from the Delaware Water Gap down to the Jersey shore for salt, and that they came through here and camped on the hill behind the house where many, many arrowheads were found through the years. When they farmed it, every time they plowed, they found arrowheads. But that was because the water here this was a good source of water for them on their trips to and from the Delaware.
You can envision that this is an area that animals, to avoid like winds and harsh storms and whatever, would take refuge in. And then they would come out from there, go onto the knoll and sun themselves, where the Lenape would then hunt them. So it was a hunting ground. According to Hinchman, it is from this den of wild animals that Denville derives its name.
I like people to understand the true picture are Native Americans. The Native Americans are the people who were here long before Columbus. They are our earliest ancestors that were here in this area. And I feel that we must learn more of the history of our country and of our state and of our county, and where to begin is with the people who were here first.
My name is James Lone Bear Reevy, and I'm chairman of the New Jersey Indian Office, which is located in Orange, New Jersey. What we try to do is keep our culture alive, and we go around to schools and to historical places, museums, and we try to tell the public what the Lenape was really like. My mother came from what was called the Powhatan Mountains up here, her ancestors did, and my father, people came from down in Monmouth County, and they were known as Sand Hill Indians. When the first Dutch people came here, the Lenape were very friendly to these people. Now first let me explain something. Lenape is an old word that we called ourselves before Europeans came here. Len means common, and ape means person, and Lenape-uk is the plural. And the English called us Delaware Indians because we were located on both sides of the Delaware River. The Delaware River, of course, was named after an Englishman, and it wasn't the name that we called. We called the Delaware River Lenape-Wisipu or Lenape-Wihituk. While some still remained in the state of New Jersey, probably 300 to 400 people remained in the state of New Jersey, and in 1745, the Quakers took pity upon the natives who remained here. After the Quakers came the Presbyterians, the missionaries to the Lenape, were very influential in teaching our people some of the ways of the Europeans, and we became English-type farmers at that time.
Of course, New York was discovered by the Dutch. They named it New Amsterdam, and that's how they got in. They came to this country, and they came and they explored, and they got into this area. They're the ones who built this house in 1740, and they used as the main frame of the house half a tree. They were excellent builders. The Dutch were very good builders. They were shipbuilders, world famous shipbuilders. They did a good job. This house, if you'll notice, the ceilings are not really very high by comparison to other houses. The reason for that is it was a heat conservation. The lower the ceiling, the more you preserve the heat. It's not getting lost in the rafters, so to speak.
Sure. The actual earliest recording of any European settler is William Penn's deed of 1715 in this area. So William Penn, being the first deed holder to Denville, this must have been a pretty special place. And most people don't realize that, they associate William Penn with Pennsylvania. Well before he went to Pennsylvania, he owned a good chunk of New Jersey, and then moved over onto the other side of the river and established Philadelphia. Denville is an area for the forging because of the river power. You have the Rockaway River, you have the Den Brook, and the forges are situated along those areas in Rockaway, in Denville, and further on down the Den Brook.
When they would take molten steel and to form it to different things, and they'd pound it, and I mean, you could boom, boom, boom. You could hear it all the way down here.
Sure. And Joe Ballin, who we don't really know much about, we know he comes here approximately around 1730, most likely is a tenant on the property of William Biddle, probably paying some fee to Biddle. But we do know that there were others that came and worked the forge, and one of them was Martin Hyler. Martin Hyler would build a little stone house up close to the entrance of where Rock Ridge Lake is today. And he worked the forge with Joe Allen, and then I imagine Joe Ballin's son as well. In 1800, you have John Hinchman's farm. John Hinchman's house is on the corner of what is today Diamond Spring Road and Main Street. And he's on that corner, and he owns several acres, many acres behind his house, which is farmland, which he farms. And that is farmed and continues to be farmland all the way up until the 1920s.
Right. I mean, we farmed in Denville. Rockaway Township was too hilly. Mm-hmm. They could grow mess with cows up there, but as far as growing crops, Denville had the best along the Rockaway River, which are now big housing developments, but Bush Farms, the Sook Farms, the Hamilton Farms, went through both towns, and they provided a lot of fresh produce. They felt like they were excluded from their government process, I believe that's why all of them did, but Borough did it first, and then we did it. I mean, the landmass that we broke away from was immense. It's still 49 square miles, Rockaway Township.
When we talk about the time and the role of the farmers, clearly the fact that Denville is a separate township today is a result of a farmers' revolt. Taxes had gone up in 1912, and the farmers revolted, led by Frederick Eugene Parks, who would become the first mayor. But there were other elements that fed into that, and those were the developers that saw this opportunity in this new township for development. So the combination of the developers for the downtown area and the farmers in the outlying areas, this was the motivation behind the creation of a new Denville Township, which passed overwhelmingly by the voters and became a reality in April of 1913. I think people have to put things in perspective. In the township of Denville, the newly formed township of Denville, the village of Denville was one of several villages. So you look at Union Hill, or the little village of Franklin that existed off of Franklin Road. Now Denville, the village, is central, and because of that, economically is able to surpass and survive and surpass the other little villages which by today's standards have pretty much vanished. So in 1913, if you're looking at downtown Denville, you're looking at a couple of buildings, a general store, a post office, couple of houses of the old houses of the original settlers, and farmland. Farms on either side. Keep in mind too, as time goes on, more people are in the area. Denville is taking on more of a separate identity apart from Rockaway Borough or Rockaway Township. So construction and building to attract people into Denville is going on in the 1920s big time.
Back in those days, there were maybe about 2,000 people in Denville. And in the summertime, it was about 25,000 or something like that.
The older lakes, as we see them today, would be Cedar Lake and Essling Lake. Now, Essling Lake, unlike the other communities, was not developed as a residential or summer community. It was developed as an ice-producing lake. And in its early years, you see huge ice houses, storage houses.
I used to go up to Essling Lake to swim. Myself, my brothers, my sister, everybody that couldn't afford to join the Indian Lake Community Club.
Well, Essling Lake is still the only true summer community left in Denville, and it used to be a campground. and then people started building small structures on them, but they can't stay all year round.
Cedar Lake was expanded from a smaller lake called Cranberry Pond, and the size of it was expanded. So there was always some body of water there, though smaller than today.
And Cedar Lake basically developed as a hunting and fisherman's getaway. You know, the early cabins over there were pretty much for hunting and fishing.
Cedar Lake, Lake Arrowhead, Indian Lake, Rockridge Lake, these are all initially developed to attract summer visitors to the area.
Most of Indian Lake was summer community. The majority of the people were just up here for the summertime.
Growing up like in Indian Lake, you come Halloween, we used to have to walk all halfway around the lake just to see if the light was on, because everything else was all black because they were all summer bungalows.
Well, it really started to change near the Depression, because what happened in the 20s and early 30s, when people had summer homes out here and living in the city, and the Depression caused them no longer to be able to afford two homes. So many of them moved out here.
Yes, as a matter of fact, when growing up, there were like maybe 4 all-year-rounders. Everybody else, come Labor Day, locked everything up and went home to the city. Went to New York, to Jersey City, primarily.
Matter of fact, we called the year-rounders the local yokels, because there was only a few of us.
After Cedar Lake and Essling Lake, you have Rockridge Lake, and that would be followed by Lake Arrowhead and Indian Lake, and they were both developed by the Arthur Crane Company. Well, Arthur Crane is a developer. You know, he's a visionary, and he sees the potential of land. He sees there's potential communities, creating a lake community for people to come out from the city. Because why? You know, if you're in the city and now you can it's a train ride to a place called Denville, and in the summer months you can live in a nice, cool bungalow on the side of a lake, and the kids could play in the lake and take boats out on the lake, and you don't have to sit in the hot city. Arthur Crane, being a savvy businessman, sees this and recognizes it and begins to create these lake communities, and they're for all different price ranges. The original thought of Indian Lake was to be a community of these large vacation homes appealing to a wealthier community, but that was changed to the more affordable summer bungalow style that Indian Lake became.
My father bought a house from Harry Husser, who owned most of the property in Indian Lake at that time. I'm 84 years old. I think I'm one of the oldest living that lived on the same street here all my life. Well, the lake has grown, everybody building up, going up with extensions, and beautiful. The lake is great.
If I have to look back at my life, there were several periods of my life that I'd say, well, those were the best days of my life. Those summers, like 45 through the early 50s, were the best years of my life in that era, because we had Indian Lake, we had the community club. You know, we used to have wonderful times.
We had a good life here at Indian Lake.
Around the opening of Indian Lake, we see the opening of the Denville Shack.
We couldn't wait for the Denville Shack to open. That was the best place. Really. You're down there and you could get French fries and a soda for $0.25.
Denville Shack, great place. That was terrific hot dogs.
Yeah.
Terrific hot dogs.
Denville Shack was where the Burger King is now. It was the same type of place, except you could eat inside or outside, and there was a bar there.
They had baskets of shrimp and they had baskets of chicken. 21 shrimp for $1 with French fries. And my dad used to pick it up for us every Friday night. That was a great, great place.
My mother-in-law says she saw Frank Sinatra at the Denville Shack in the 40s.
But they also, you go way back when, there was always an attraction at Denville Shack.
But probably the greatest stunt that they ever pulled was the effort to break the longest standing record of being a man buried alive, and that was a Pennsylvania resident named Professor Ray Richards, and we don't even know I mean, he was only in his 20s. I don't know what kind of professor he was at the time. He was buried 6 feet under the ground in a steel coffin, and he had these 2 large air pipes. One, you drop food down. The other one, it was right by his face, so you'd look down and be able to talk to him and look at his face, so you had to pay for that. So, I mean, the people came from miles around. It actually made national news. It was actually that much of a deal. He lasted 21 days, so he fell far short of the record. And even at one point, there was a robbery attempt. A couple of thugs came by and they tried to, they threatened to burn. They were going to throw matches and gasoline down the tube and burn him alive if he didn't send the money up. But fortunately for him, somebody caught it. But he actually came out because he got into an underground fight with the owner of the place and said, "That's it, take me out, I'm not going to do it anymore." Serious development starts in Denville around 1920 or so. The trolley is in place at that time and operating. Of course, the trains are operating. Automobiles now are becoming common. You're definitely seeing a lot more commerce through Denville, and clearly initiated by all of the development and innovations of the day.
Let's look at Denville's origin. And the reason it's the hub of Morris County is that it was the hub of a rail network, a road network, a canal. So there were at that point several different means of transportation through Denville, which is what caused Denville to develop in the first place.
Denville was actually founded as a junction. The railroad splits in Denville. There's a Boonton line, and then there's a line that goes down to Morristown in that area. That's what spurred development here, yeah. The early railroad. And of course, prior to that, there was the canal. The railroads were after the canal system. The canal system was probably heyday, maybe 1822 to the 1860s. And then, of course, the railroads took over after that.
I don't believe the canal ever served as a public transportation. In those days, before the train, people rode horses and horse and buggy. That was it. We start to see the trains come through Morris County around 1837. So there's a very limited life for the Morris Canal because the trains not only transport people, but they transport goods. And what they can do, what takes you, a week to do on the Morris Canal to go from the Delaware River to the Hudson River, it takes you a couple hours on the train. So there's much more of a romantic history of the canal, but a very short-lived functional period for the canal. The trolley starts to come into play about 1899. The Morris County Traction Company is formed that year, and the idea is to build a trolley system between some of the smaller towns here in central Morris County. At least that's the initial plan. The trolley by 1910 is operating through Denville, and for the most part in the downtown area, it's operating behind the buildings on Main Street.
Behind the Denville Shack, behind Denville Bear. It went all along that area.
Of course, you know about the Rockaway line. The railroad track that went through right behind the house was the Rockaway line. Went right up through Rockaway.
We still have remnants of where the trolley ran. If you go on Route 46 heading west towards Rockaway, are the remnants of the trolley car, and then it went underneath that bridge by the bird factory.
It's a convenient means of transportation. It's a people transportation, takes people from place to place.
Back when I was very small, if you wanted to go shopping for clothing, shoes, and that, you either went to Morristown, Patterson, or Newark, or Dover. There weren't too many buildings in there. Heck, you go downtown and you knew everybody's car that was there. Oh, that's this one's father's car, this one's that. I mean, there were only maybe 4 or 5 cars on Broadway.
When the people that originally laid out downtown Denville had a lot of forethought, when they made the street as wide as they did, because we're very fortunate to have the great downtown area that we have. Because I mean, that's all people say to me is, "Oh, you live in Denville? I love downtown Denville." I said, "You should have been here, grown up in downtown Denville. It was unbelievable, you know."
As much as we look today and say, "Gee, we have a great little downtown," that wasn't necessarily the feeling of the people at the time Arthur Crane came in and changed the look of downtown forever. The trees came down, everything was opened up. He built this wide road, brand new road that would become the new center of commerce in Denville, what we know today as Broadway, originally called Denville Boulevard. The change of the town was significant in its appearance beginning in 1928, 1929, and the lazy little town was gone. Because now you had paved roads instead of dirt roads. It was a major highway going through the town, not just a little path that horses and buggies use. Stores were opening up on Broadway, and a lot of traffic through town.
And Gerard's, we always went to Gerard's for anything. And I worked there when I was grammar school, high school, serving sodas and so forth at Gerard's drugstore when Mr. Matthews was the head. Yeah, it was a soda fountain and a drugstore, both had booths, and they carried Dolly Madison ice cream. It was good ice cream.
Sometimes my mom would send me out to get something from the A&P, and then she'd give me a nickel to go across the street to Gerard's to get a cherry Coke. That was a biggie. I didn't mind taking my bicycle and riding out
to get the Coke at the end.
And the cherry Coke, that took care of it.
Well, Broadway was originally, it was called Route 6, and then they changed it to 46, and somewhere around sometime in the early 1940s, they bypassed it. That's why they call it Broadway, because it was wide enough, because it was the main highway. Nice wide main street, and you look at it, and what else would you call it but Broadway? Yeah. When I was a kid, this was pretty well built up.
Yeah.
And there was empty lots, but a lot of, this building was here, and the building that the diner is in, that was originally the United Cigar. I've been involved in a business in town since I was like 14 years old, and my father opened a store. Well, stores come and go. Sure. Some stores have been here in Denville for 50 and 60 years, and some only last a year. So, of course, it's constantly changing.
Everybody knew everybody, and handshakes were good.
We're lucky that a lot of the local residents support the town. They like the small town image. The whole ambiance of Denville was quite a nice little retail outlet.
To me, it's a very perfect location for most any type of business you want.
So I think that's an important thing to remember, that the business district has always given us, is that identity.
I did go to the Denville Theater. They used to have a matinee on Saturday and Sunday afternoon, and all of the kids would line up, and it would probably go right from where the Denville Theater is to where the appliance store is now. That's how long the line might be.
Sometimes one kid would buy a ticket, and another kid would go that same kid would open the side door, and 3 or 4 others would sneak in.
Oh yeah, I saw West Side Story in Denville Theater. I saw so many movies in Denville Theater. You went there on a Saturday if you had nothing else to do, if it wasn't nice weather, and you went to the theater.
Because I was in there a couple of times way back in the 70s to see some movies there. I remember that.
We didn't have a lot of money when we were kids, so you had to save up your allowance if you wanted to go to a movie, and it was something that was a special treat.
We used to go to the movie theater in town, and I forget how much it cost, but it was great.
My recollection is that you'd pay a quarter, you'd usually see a Three Stooges clip, a couple of cartoons, and maybe a single or double feature, depending upon how long the movie was. So that was a real bargain for a quarter. And it really was a very nice movie theater. You really felt that it took you to a different place. Let me put it that way.
I remember seeing a 3D movie when it first came out.
Oh, yeah. Do you remember what it was?
Yep.
What was it?
The Charge at Feather River. And as a young child, with my glasses on, and all them arrows and stuff, I was ducking behind the scene. Really, I mean, it was like unbelievable.
I guess you saw the things about this Wayside Inn. Used to be the big thing in Denville. I mean, people used to come from New York and all over the place. The Wayside Inn was a very popular place.
The Wayside Inn begins, as far as we know, and according to some of the promotional materials from the Wayside Inn itself, they establish a date of a tavern on that property dating to around 1757. Now, the building that we identify as of the year 1811 as the Denville House, and that building goes through a number of expansions throughout the 1800s. And Denville becomes, and this hotel becomes, a meeting place of politicians from all over the state. One of its visitors that is documented is President Grover Cleveland. Now we get into the early 1900s, and there is a massive fire in 1902, and the hotel burns to the ground. Well, keeping in the tradition of a tavern at that location, new investors come in and they build what most people who are old enough to recall would recall as the Wayside Inn. And as the Wayside Inn, they often promoted its extensive history on that spot back to 1757.
We didn't have mail delivery. It was my job to go to the post office because every family had a box in the post office, and then I'd walk home. But I'd walk from school through Main Street, and I would hear the organ playing in the dining room there. Of course, I was just a kid.
Matter of fact, that was basically the first time I ever went out to a dinner for two. I won, and I took my girlfriend to the Wayside Inn, okay? Because that was the only big place in town, okay?
The store I worked in, Eppie's, was diagonally across the street, and Mr. Epstein or Mrs. Epstein sometimes was there, and I had to go get them, maybe to eat dinner, maybe somebody called them at the store, and so on.
We used to go there often for dinner. St. Mary's had their card parties there all the time back in those days. And the card parties, we were in high school, and my mom and dad, my sister and I would go to the card parties together and play pinochle.
My sister and I used to entertain. We used to sing and dance there.
So the Wayside Inn was again a hotbed of political activity, a lot of bootlegging going on at this time.
But my father used to tell us a lot of unique things. Maybe I shouldn't tell you this, but it was funny. Okay, the Wayside Inn was owned by, I believe it was Fred Henn, and during the Prohibition. Okay, my father, I guess he knew quite well, and he'd get a message to Paul, and Paul would hook up the team of horses. They'd come down to the Wayside Inn, load all the booze on it, and he'd take it and ride through what is now Arrowhead Lake. It wasn't developed yet. It's all woods and so on. It just went on until the revenues, I guess. Well, of course, when he got there was no booze. Okay, then they'd come back in the morning, unload it, and then
I did. I was walking home from school in third grade, which I think was 1953, and the Wayside Inn was on fire.
My dad was taking me to the train the morning that the Wayside Inn went on fire, so I remember that the smoke was a big fire.
When we would get the 7-6 train, and I went out to take them, and the fire trucks were already out, we saw the smoke. I dropped them off the station, I came back, and by then, of course, the fire was really roaring. So I skipped school that day. I pulled over and I walked down to where the fire was, and I watched the fire along with 1,000 other people.
Sure. We heard the Wayside Inn was on fire, and of course we used to have to catch the bus right on 46 to go to Dover. So we decided to run down and see the fire. We told them we couldn't get to school because the fire, and of course the principal outsmarted us and said, "I'm sorry, Charles, but the bus, you should have caught the bus on the other side of the fire, not that far." So.
Denville was clearly an area that valued education, and that goes for every corner of the town. In downtown Denville, school was run in that tavern On the upper floor of the tavern, we have two examples of tavern schools in Denville, one there and one down by the Opanaki Pond. And then, around the time of the Revolution, individual schoolhouses were built. We start to see those schools become obsolete and being replaced with bigger, newer schools. 1855 Denville Downtown Schoolhouse. And then in Union, we see the Union Schoolhouse after the original one is burned to the ground in 1860. So things are happening on both sides of town pretty much at the same time period.
Main Street School was great. I loved it. And it was, it's kind of like it is now. It's the base we ate downstairs in the bottom floor. Lunch, that's where our lunch was. We had a lot of old teachers, and it was really nice.
We had fun. We were mischievous. We went to school to learn, and we were happy as hell to learn. We liked the teachers who we thought were good teachers, and we all knew who the good teachers were. So we knew the teachers were worth so-so or were not so good. And we made up for that by doing work on our own.
Oh, sure. Sure, went to Main Street, went to Riverview, didn't go to Valley View, didn't go to Lakeview.
We all went to Main Street School. Matter of fact, a lot of people don't realize it, but up until the year I graduated, ninth grade you served ninth grade at Main Street School.
Well, because Denville exploded.
In terms of population?
Population. See, because previous, Main Street School was plenty big enough. Sure. Because everybody went back to the city for the winter months. It was once when people started to come up and winterize their bungalows and make it their year-round home and raise their children here, then more schools were needed.
Yeah. By 1958, we have Lakeview School in the southern end, and a little bit earlier in the 50s, we have Riverview School, and then by the 1960s, the middle school at Valley View School.
So I went to Lakeview through 5th grade, and then I went over to Valley View, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And again, that was a relatively new school at that point also.
Well, I taught 5th grade for 15 years here in Denville at Riverview. Well, I think Riverview, it was 5th grade, and it was an enclosed classroom. You had the same kids all the time. And I think the difference is that in junior high, you have a different group of kids coming in all the time. And you're able to relate to these kids and see more.
The high school that serviced the area was Rockaway High School. And Rockaway High School took people in from everybody from Denville, from Wharton, and from parts of Rockaway Township. That laid the foundation for what would become in the 1950s as the Mars Hills Regional School District.
Oh, so you went to Mars Hills?
Yeah, in the last class. When I was a senior in September of 1964, Mars Knoll was open for juniors and below.
There's definitely a change in the style of teaching from when I was in school. You know, it was all information that was being disseminated from the teacher to the student. And now teaching is more critical thinking.
Well, but I find the schools just are amazing. We're such a part of the community, and many of the teachers do live in Denville, but many don't and do just as much.
I was raised in an environment, starting from a kid, where you learned and you were exposed to not just playing ball in the street in the afternoon, but literature and science and arts and opera, and you had a desire to learn as much as you could learn when you were in school.
Yeah, I think Denville's school system is fantastic. I think there's a tremendous number of people who really, truly care about our kids, who want to keep them safe in today's crazy day and age, who want to see our kids succeed, teachers who want to see their kids come back and walk through the hallways and see how good they've done.
I miss these kids when they go to 5th. And you know, I'm telling you, when they go to college and everything, they come back here, I got more respect from these kids than anything else.
You know, you don't realize how many kids you touch as a teacher. But I was blessed. I mean, I taught 40 years. How many times I called in sick? I had 500 and some odd sick days. I lost all those sick days. I never called. I never felt like I was going to work. I felt I was blessed. And if you kids say, why don't you take a day off? I took a personal day one time. I got the meetings up. They said, don't ever take another day off. But as far as calling in sick days, I never did.
Most of the people in southern Denville, since you had a road that went right into Rockaway, they had more connection with Rockaway. And because of that, when there was need to expand the Presbyterian church that was in Parsippany, they decided to build a Presbyterian church in Rockaway. As that part of Denville continued to expand, a separate Presbyterian community began to emerge in now just southern Denville, in what's now the Union Hill area. And that's when we see in 1816, when the Union Schoolhouse is established, it's established not just with public money, but with church money. And it's used for not just public school, but for Sunday school, and also used for church services. Now, as we get to the end of the 19th century, we see the building of the Union Chapel.
Well, the Methodist Church up here was the only church in town years and years ago. That's before my time.
Originally, there was one church servicing the Rockaway Valley and Denville. The church was built around 1814 or so, close to where Rockaway River Country Club is. And then it was decided that there should be two churches, one for Rockaway Valley, one for Denville. So a new church was built in the valley, and the old church was moved piece by piece to downtown Denville somewhere around 1842. In more recent times, we see the emergence of several other types of churches, including the Church of the Savior, which is the Episcopal Church, the Prince of Peace Lutheran Church. We also have the Bible Fellowship Church, and in the southern end of town we have the New Hope Church. These are all churches that have their origins in the 1950s, 1960s, and they serve the diverse spiritual needs of the community.
The church was built in 1926. It was a mission of St. Cecilia's in Rockaway. In other words, it didn't have its own pastor. The pastor from Rockaway, matter of fact, they were the two brothers named Hewitson. Hence you have Hewitson Road right down the street here. In 1941, St. Mary's became its own parish, independent, and that's when Monsignor Furman was the pastor then. Of course, the church didn't look the way it looks today. It was much smaller back in 1926 and in 1941, and in 1958 it was extended to look the way it does now. I see. Because we got so big.
Sure.
And the school was built in 1954, St. Mary's School. That's why they had to go straight out. They couldn't go sideways. So that's why it looks like a bowling alley. And then the fancy front of the church that we call the narthex, it's a big vestibule or gathering place. Sure. That was added on in 1996 to make some room.
What do you think draws people up to St. Mary's?
I think it's because we're a very welcoming place, and we're a very friendly place, and people know that. And they always say how pretty the church looks, number one, and they always say, number two, we make everybody feel at home, which is a nice thing. They just feel like your family, something like that.
Our Mother Frances Stradle is our foundress, who started the Sisters of the Sorrowful Mother, and Father Jacques then helped because of his familiarity, I believe, with the night water cure, and also he had a good business head and spoke English. Our sisters, when they came here, they were the most marvelous women. They didn't speak English. They took a risk. And it worked.
This is St. Francis Health Resort, and it was established over 100 years ago. The sisters came here, and here I'm going to introduce you to Sister Bellamina. What should I say now? Here. How long have you been here?
I have been here 62 years housekeeping. And I was from Germany, from Black Forest. We came, we were together about 40. Later on a little bit more. First we were about 20, 23, 25, and then Every year some sisters came from Germany, and then we got more sisters to help us. And what we did housekeeping, we help together, we pray together, we recreate together, and we have beautiful memories of each other. We loved each other.
And do you remember when the farm was here, when everything was being...
Yes, we had cows. Some of the sisters got up in the morning and they milked the cows.
Pick the apples?
We picked the apples together, big piles of apples. We wrapped each one in paper and put them in barrels. Then we made a lot of applesauce. That was good for the guests. They loved applesauce. And we like to treat them guests because the guests, we always said they are our daily bread. But when we sisters started the treatment room, we didn't go outside, but we gave the guests bubble baths, sea salt baths, and then massages and showers, hot and cold.
That was part of the water treatment, right?
That was the water treatment, yes, and compresses when they had pain, hot compresses, and then cold up on top, and that helped them.
Still working?
Yeah, still
How many hours a day? How many hours a day?
We don't count the hours because we worked for the Lord and for the community.
Since the sisters arrived, the property has gone through many incarnations, from its origins as the mansion house of the Glover family dating back to the early 1800s.
It was a self-sustaining outfit. It was wonderful. And tell you, Mel, my father, he did, like when he worked there, he took care of all the horses. At that one time, I guess they had about 20 cows. They had a big pig pen. They had all chickens and everything else. Of course, the nuns did a lot of the growing of, as far as the vegetables and all that, but there was all kinds of apple trees, pear trees, all around. That brought a lot of people in, wealthy people, and then of course wealthy people have relatives, and relatives saw what Denville was like and so on, and I think that helped Denville grow.
Before St. Clair's, you only had the hospital in Dover. That was the closest hospital. And there was not a religious associated hospital. And of course, the sisters owned all of the land. It was a logical extension of the community that they built there, was to provide a hospital for the people in the area. And the ground was broken in 1950, and within 2 years, I believe, the hospital was open.
They went about raising money. Buy a brick, $1 a brick for St. Clair's. They did everything. Any way they could raise money. To be St. Francis, it needs to be in a place like Denville. To have the land, the beauty, the ambiance, and the history of our sisters.
£57,000 of thrust with a throttle attached. No engine like this had ever existed before, but Thiokol built one for the X-15.
Ready to launch. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. That's a good light.
Hello, on thrust, just the chamber reading.
We had some experience in this field. Reaction motors had built power plants for all of the X-1s and for the D-558 Phase 2 aircraft. But those rocket engines we had made for earlier research planes were primitive forerunners of the engine we built for the X-15.
The biggest employer in Morris County years ago was Picatinny Arsenal. They had more than 25,000 employees. Of course, they got many government contracts. That's the reason that there was a lot of building going on in this area.
Mm-hmm. Reaction motors, that was a booming business, there's no doubt about it. And they developed a lot of, I didn't work there. I worked at Picatinny. Reaction motors up behind Picatinny. I don't know if you know that area much at all. Reaction Motors had a lot of buildings up in there too.
Yeah.
And they did a lot of work right in conjunction with Picatinny.
Several sophisticated engines which eventually led to our space programs were developed here at the Denville site.
In the atmosphere, it flies like an airplane. At the edge of space, it is controlled by Gemini-type reaction jets. On November 18th, the X-15 rocketed to a world record speed for winged aircraft, 4,159 miles per hour.
Again, Reaction Motors got a lot of government contracts. The idea is they developed jet fuel, rocket fuel, those sorts of things. They employed a number of people in the community, all the way from chemists to security guards and maintenance people. It was a big employer, and they had different areas where they would work. 400 Morris Avenue was the main building and probably the first building, but then there were a number of buildings that they built behind there. And they had different test areas to test out the rocket fuel and things like that.
Remember that when they used to fire off that jet engine for the X-15 out at Lake Denmark, they had a test site out there, and boy, I mean, that was so noisy, and shake the buildings, and so on. They did some marvelous things there.
My father worked for Reaction Motors for more than 20 years, which then became Thiokol Chemical Corporation, and they were the ones who developed the fuel that launched the rockets, into space.
The X-1.
Yeah, so it was kind of, it was an exciting time, it was an exciting time to grow up around here.
In the early 70s, Denville changed its charter. Until then, from the beginning, until then, the mayor was elected by the council, or the township committee it was called then. So the people didn't elect their mayor directly. And it was basically a one-year term. That's what's called a weak mayor form of government. The mayor was not elected by the people, elected by the township committee, and everything he did, he had a fire commissioner, a police commissioner. It was just, he basically chaired the committee and they called him mayor. Strong mayor, which started when Jack O'Keefe took the charter to the people to vote, started in I think 73. He was a big advocate of that. He changed the form of government to a strong mayor. A strong mayor has control, as I did or my predecessor did, and I can name them, there are only several of us, had direct control of all personnel, of all buildings, hiring, firing. You were really the chief executive officer.
I've learned a lot from all the mayors that came before me.
The object of municipal planning is to achieve the highest and best use for a piece of property. And the township, about 20 years ago, acquired this piece with the object of putting a municipal complex on it. Well, in the intervening 20 years, we've been through a lot in the township of Denville. But today we are beginning the process of dedicating this to really the highest and best use, which is public use. And on top of that, I don't think there could be any better use for a piece of property than a structure such as a library, which will bring enlightenment to all of the people of the community.
The roots of the Denville Library go back to around 1877. And at that time, there was a traveling library that was maintained by the Union Sabbath School down in Union Hill. Eventually, those books end up in Main Street School. And from there, in the early 1930s, a library is opened on Broadway, at number 32 Broadway. After that, the library opens on Diamond Spring Road in the early 1980s to its present location.
If the character of a community can be judged by the quality of its library, I believe that the community of Denville is in great shape because we have a great library.
The role of government, particularly at the local level, is primarily the health and safety of its residents. The role is to make sure that the water flows, as does DPW do, that the sewage stays in the pipes and gets to the RVRSA, that roads are plowed, that roads are repaired, that all of those things that are part of our infrastructure of town are maintained and function properly.
There were only 3 department heads, myself, Joe Lowell, who was the Public Works Director. Now, he was truly a department head, and then the finance director. Joe Lowell comes to me, and he was always trying to save money, which was wonderful. And he said, Ellen, you know the flags in town? They're all tatted. He said, I saw something where I can get these flags at such a reasonable price. Let's get the new flags and put them up for Memorial Day. I said, great, Joe, go buy them. So he buys them. However, they were not on poles. That's why they were a good price. So you don't get mad. You just say, you know what we're going to do, Joe? I'll get a group of people, and I invited all these people to come in, and Joe Lowell and myself, and we got drills, and we took the flags off the old poles, and we put the new ones on, and that was family saying, you did a good job, you really wanted to save some money, and we're going to save your reputation and work together and put those flags up. So, I mean, that's a simple story, but the thing is, what we did was, we did more than just put up new flags and save money. We became closer in saying, like, it wasn't tag you're it, or what are you, some kind of a fool, you know, why didn't you investigate? No, it was, how can we make lemonade? Let's make some lemonade.
Being here, you know, if you can't do a good job for yourself, then, you know, so it was a great thing for me. It was like, you know, it wasn't work, you know. I mean, I enjoyed tremendously, you know, and they gave me a check to do it, you know. So.
Between DPW, police, and fire, you have the core of any local government. When someone picks up a phone and their house is being robbed, or the house is on fire, or they're having a heart attack, there has to be some assurance that someone will show to help them. That's the primary role of what government does.
And you know, it's what drew me to police work was that you get to do everything here. That in any one given day, there's a potential that I could be a policeman, a priest, a doctor, a nurse, a lawyer, a counselor, a mediator, somebody's newfound friend, a plumber, a fireman, a tow truck operator, a car mechanic, you name it. And on some days you get to be 10 of them in one day. On some days you get to do none of them because it's really dead. But the weird thing about the job that we do is we're immune from nothing here. I can tell you that volunteer firemen and policemen are cut from the same cloth. We do a very similar job, although one runs into burning buildings and one runs into danger where guns are being fired. It's the same general, it's that helping people drive. I don't know where it came from for me. I have no one in my lineage that was ever involved in law enforcement, but I was really driven. And when asked by Mrs. Sandman why I wanted this job, the first answer, and people sometimes think it's corny, but it's what I look for when I hire policemen, is to help people. It's, if you don't want to help people, this isn't the job for you. And volunteer firefighting was the same way. There was a sense of that action and adrenaline rush, a little bit of danger, but then there was that ability to help people. That I think that's what drove me. I don't know where it comes from.
Sometimes we have the opportunity, if there's a building that's going to be torn down, where we can run simulations from time to time to test our preparedness to respond in case of a severe emergency. In the past, we used school buses before, where we've simulated many injuries. This year, we simulated an explosion and fire up at the Valley View School. So there is quite a bit of value to testing our preparedness to respond in that kind of an emergency.
There were significant floods in the 1930s, in the 1970s, and of course more recently.
Yeah, Irene did so much damage to this town, it's unbelievable. I mean, I cannot believe the amount of water we got downtown and the amount of damage we got downtown. You know, I mean, it's just unbelievable. Never seen anything like it.
And I used to be a weatherman when I was in college, so that's one of my hobbies. And I said, you know, I don't think we got that much rain. You tell me where all that water came from. I still can't figure it out. If somebody opened up a lock or a dam or something like, because we had like 3 foot of water. Even in our worst floods back in the 70s and so on, I never saw that much water. I took pictures. I can't figure it out where that came from. Because it did not seem like it rained that hard. Windy, yes. Rain, no.
We had a lot of rain. That was a 500-year flood event. It was a 100-year rainstorm, but it rained. It had 8.62 inches of rain the 2 weeks prior to the storm. The ground was saturated, and the river was high. And then we got an 8.84 inches of rain overnight. It was a 100-year storm, but the conditions made it a 500-year event.
I think that all emergencies and all crises like this they're acts of God, and you can't control every flood that I've lived through in Denville, and I've lived through every one since '45, is a little bit different. They come at you a little bit differently. They depend on weather conditions someplace else. So you can plan and you can take steps to save lives, but when the storm hits, it's up to you on the ground. I'm often concerned about people say, well, the county didn't come in and the state didn't come in and FEMA let me down. You learn as a mayor or a community leader that for the first 4 days to a week, you're going to be alone. You've got to be prepared to run your town on your own, because the other towns and the other emergency services are having problems of their own.
I don't know if you remember, during Hurricane Irene, they were serving dinners there. Okay, every night for months, they were serving dinners to the 150 or so people who were, displaced. But again, this is what Denville is like. And it would be a scout troop or a church group, or even like a neighborhood of people would sponsor it. Well, the teachers wanted to sponsor one. And we served dinners for everybody there.
It's beautiful.
And that was the night, I don't know if you ever heard about the rainbow. The municipal building has that big room. So we had it all with tables, and you put we wanted the dignity for these people who've been through this, and candles and all this kind of stuff. Sure. And one little kid came running in and says, there's a rainbow. So we all go out on the Route 46 side, and this is what we saw. And this rainbow looked like it started in town and went all the way over, and it looked like it ended on Riverside Drive. And that's who was affected, the town and Riverside Drive. We were brought to tears. It was amazing. Beautiful. So then what happened is Miss Benedict, do you remember her?
Miss Benedict, I had her, yeah.
She has K-Kids. It's the Kiwanis Club, but it's the kids' version. She and the K-Kids got this together, where all the kids in our school did one of these rainbows, and the teachers went and delivered these to the stores.
Sure.
And when they were all rebuilding, you would see many of the stores had several of these rainbows in their windows, and it was from Denville students. It was all the schools in Denville did it.
Now I'd like to bring Tom Andes up to give a brief start to the day.
Just 1 year ago, last August, we were devastated with Hurricane Irene. Today we celebrate the 1 year anniversary of Denville picking itself up and rebuilding itself.
May of 1967.
And that was for Vietnam?
Yeah. Well, Vietnam War. Yeah. And I got to come home on the 12th of December in 1969.
What was it like? Was it hard to adjust? Coming back?
No, I was home. I wasn't in a strange place, I was home. And still at that time, I knew most of the people in the town that had been here, and most of the town people that had been in the town knew who I was. So it wasn't, a big thing for me because I wasn't an outsider going to a place I'd never been before. Hey, it's this way. I was home on leave in August of 1968, and the gentleman that was the dog catcher here in town, whose name was Bill Putnam, was big in the VFW here in town, and he came and hunted me down like the dog I was and signed me up in the VFW. At that time, the American Legion didn't take you until you were honorably discharged from the service.
Right.
So I couldn't join the American Legion until I got out of the
Sure.
service.
Did you continue to serve once you returned?
No. Enough is enough is enough. The American Legion is based on the World War I veteran, founded it. It was founded in France at the end of the First World War. And the Constitution of the American Legion is all about service to the community, state and nation, for scholarships, youth programs. That's why American Legion Baseball is so big. It's basically about coming home from a war and serving your community and making it better.
Welcome to the Rotary Street Festival. It's so nice to have you here, and I hope you have a good time.
This is a very wonderful day for Rotary. It's a bright, sunny day. The crowd will be coming out. Everybody will be enjoying themselves. Plenty of food, crafts, and everything else. Most of all, of course, there's a great deal of friendship around Rotary, and it's exerted here in this festival.
This shirt has the official logo of the Joey Bella Memorial Fund imprinted on it. The shirts are on sale around Denville, $6 a piece, and all the proceeds go to the Joey Bella Memorial Fund. And nobody should be on Gardner Field July 4th without one.
And with us now is Sister Mary Urban, chairman of the board of St. Clair's Riverside Hospital. And Sister, it must be a good feeling for you to look at all the people coming into your annual Harvest Festival.
It's great. It's just wonderful. And I thank the people for the support, and I hope that everybody is going to enjoy themselves.
Well, I'm sure they will, like they do every year. 13 years of the Harvest Festival, thousands and thousands of volunteers, thousands and thousands of dollars raised. Sister, your activity with the Harvest Festival, I suppose it keeps you pretty busy all year, right?
It's almost too busy, but I love it because of the spirit of the people. And it's the people that make the Harvest Festival, really. We have wonderful people. We have chiefs and Indians. And everyone is important to us. And especially I appreciate, on behalf of the hospital, the support of the public.
Hello folks, I'm here with General Decor. Me and our gang here turned this place into a Bavarian festival, a Bavarian courtyard, with everything with an Oktoberfest theme. We took some old barns and created little villages and shops for people to buy their wares and eat all types of food. It's kind of an international affair, but with a Bavarian theme.
How long did it take you to set up for all of this?
Well, it took a couple of years in the making of it, but physically setting it up, it takes many weekday nights and 2 good weekends to get it all together.
First 50-50 that went off this morning was double what we had last year, which is an indication that we got just that many more people. It's fantastic. Well, I'll tell you, last year we raised $125,000 net, okay? And that's fantastic. But really, we had 1,400 people working here last year. That's what's incredible. So we have raised over the last, if we meet our goal this year, we'll be over $600,000 we've raised on the Harvest Festival in the last 7 years.
That's terrific.
Isn't that fantastic? And it's all gone to buy equipment that we use in our hospital to service the patients.
And remember, the Harvest Festival is a one-day fundraising event. It's a record fundraising event. It's usually held the first weekend in October, and this year it happened to be the second weekend because of holidays and whatnot. And it's really something to look forward to. There's never a problem with parking. There are shuttle buses. And for anyone who's never made it to a St. Clair's Harvest Festival, it's something that you should really come out to. And it's just something for everybody. There are buys galore.
It's a family, a nice family outing. There's something for everyone in the family.
So if you were here, look for yourself on TV. And if you weren't, come on out next year. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, baseball has always been a big pastime in Denville, as in America. After church on Sunday afternoon, the whole community basically would take a walk down Church Street. There was a big open lot back there, and they would watch the weekly baseball game. Denville had a local team, and they would have some team from out of town, and everybody would go. It was the big event of the weekend.
Did they ever talk about Imperial Field? We used to go down there and play baseball, and not at Imperial Field.
Mm-hmm. And that's where my brothers played baseball. My father used to coach them. Right off 53, right there, where this vocational school is now.
Oh, it was there for years.
I wonder why they got rid of it.
Because they didn't own the property, and it was sold to Singer, and they put a building there.
Gardner Field used to be a big place for us also, growing up.
Yeah.
You know, but we used to fish by the river.
Of course, Gardner Field was nothing but a big swamp.
It's a big swamp.
Oh yeah, we used to duck hunt in there and pheasant hunt and so on. Yeah, it was a huge swamp. What was then called the Stickle Track. Now it's the Gardner Field. It was named after William Doc Gardner because he was a baseball and basketball coach in Denville in the 30s and 40s, and then he started the Denville Little League.
The old playground was in pretty sad shape. I headed up the Project Playground 96 committee, and 1 year we raised $150,000 to build a playground. Our goal was 100, and we made it nicer than we anticipated.
I was drawn into this at that time by Jimmy McCluskey and the present mayor of our town, Tom Andes. The installation itself was done all on a volunteer basis. And that weekend, it happened to rain also. And since it was still summertime, nobody gave up. They worked through the rain and installed this thing. And I believe we influenced other townships to follow our lead. I came to Denville by accident, actually. I didn't look for a particular town. But once I was here, I made it my town.
I'd like to look at Denville and say it's a great town in a great many ways.
I think Denville is a tremendous community. You know, there's a nucleus of people that have been in the town and families that have been in the town a long time.
I know it's the only town. If you Google Denville, New Jersey comes up. There's no other Denvilles.
Denville is a very, very special place. It just, as a kid, it couldn't have been any better. We had so much here. We were all very fortunate.
Most of the people in town that when you go in, they all know you.
Growing up, you get to know a lot of people, and you develop friendships, and you get to know their families, and you get to know their parents, and they get to know you. And it was just that type of place. It was the type of community I wanted to serve.
This is what people love about Denville, because it's so easy today, especially today, to say, I'm too busy. And that you don't find in Denville. You always find people that are willing to help. And yes, you said, everybody knows each other. Well, that's because everybody gets involved, and, I feel sorry for the people that don't get to know their neighbors and get involved in things in town and get to know their community. Denville is probably more the exception than the rule today.
Yes. Oh, yeah. It's a great neighborhood town, sure.
Denville is just an incredible place to live. I mean, yes, I live here. Yes, I work here. I sent my son to school here, but it's just, in a minute, if you need help, there will be people, whether it's through the schools, the churches, neighbors. It's just a cool place.
We're so happy that so many people showed up, and in about 20 minutes the town's going to be packed because everybody's going to be done eating supper, and they're all going to rush down here. See? Now what you have to do is make sure you show this next year before the open house so we can get even more people out. But the weather's nice, and there's an awful lot going on, and it's fantastic. We especially want to thank the volunteers. So many people that are dressed up and helping out and this kind of stuff. It's a lot of fun, and thanks for covering it for us.
But I think Denville's a nice town because, a lot of other towns, I think, are jealous of Denville to a certain point, or they make fun of us because we celebrate every little thing. Sure. But we're proud of our town.
Oh yeah, it's a great place to live. It really is.
We did a lot, rode our bikes around. You could ride your bikes everywhere, and just a lot of fun,
It's a great town, as you all know. It's a beautiful, beautiful place to raise a family and to live and work and retire.
I always say, every time I watch the movie It's a Wonderful Life, Bedford Falls was Denville. It's the people. The people. Without the people, the town doesn't, it doesn't mean anything. It could be a Hollywood set.
Denville is by far the only real community. All the people I've known all my life here, this is just home. Why would I can't think of anything that comes even close to this town. There's nothing like Denville.
Again, Jim, I do want to thank you for spending some time.
Oh, never would I not give an interview. It's my home, man. It's important. Thank you, Jim. Thank you.